It's February 19th here in Seoul, and I'm Kim Dami. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour, starting with automobile tariffs by the United States. President Donald Trump says the auto tariff rate will be around 25% or higher, adding details will be announced on April 2nd. U.S. and Russia agree to normalize their relations and appoint high-level teams to negotiate the end of the Ukraine war during their first round of peace talks in Saudi Arabia. Trump says he may meet his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin this month. The 10th and final hearing of President Yoon's impeachment trial will take place as planned on Thursday after the Constitutional Court rejected Yoon's request to push back the date. His criminal trial proceedings also kick off on Thursday. U.S. President Donald Trump announced he'll likely impose a 25% tariff on cars coming into his country. The tariff also targets chips and pharmaceuticals, with the announcement coming as soon as April 2nd. Lee Seung-jae reports.
In his first month back in the Oval Office, U.S. President Donald Trump has been focused on taxing imports coming into the United States, citing unfair trade. During a press conference at Mar-a-Lago in Florida on Tuesday, he was asked about the specifics of automobile tariffs that he had hinted at earlier.
Yeah, I probably will tell you that on April 2nd, but it'll be in the neighborhood of 25%.
Trump also said that it's likely that he will announce a 25% tariff on chips and pharmaceuticals coming into the United States. However, with pharmaceuticals, he hinted that while it may be initially 25% or higher, it will go up significantly over the course of a year. Due to the massive tariffs that Trump plans on imposing, the U.S. leader said that major car and chip companies have already approached his administration, hinting that new plants are now likely to be built in the United States.
I do want to say while I'm up here, I've been contacted by some of the biggest companies in the world, and because of what we're doing economically and through tariffs and taxes and incentives, they want to come back into the United States. And we'll be announcing various very large companies, the biggest actually, and they'll be coming back having to do with chips and having to do also with cars and lots of other things. We're going to be.
Meanwhile, President Trump has commented on the North Korean troops who have fought alongside the Russian military in the Kursk region for the first time since taking office. According to Trump, many North Koreans have been killed fighting in the war. The comments also come as his administration is holding talks with Russian officials to discuss a plan to end the war in Ukraine. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Steel and aluminum tariffs on all countries by March 12th, no exception there. And now, at least 25% automobile tariff starting in April. How can South Korea survive through Trump's tariff salvo this time? Let's turn to Professor Shin Myung-gyu this morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
So at least a 25% tariff rate for automobiles. This should be another big concern for South Korea, as the U.S. is a huge automobile export market to us, right?
Yes, it is really a big concern, and 25% hike in the tariff rate seems to be really huge. According to recent data, more than 50% of the automobile export from Korea is to the U.S. In particular, about 1 million automobiles were exported to the U.S., but only 40,000 were imported from the U.S., making a huge gap between export and import. Given that the Korean economy now heavily depends on the automobile industry, and about 30% of total exports were taken by this industry, this may be problematic because it can potentially drag down the Korean economy further.
Well, that is why Seoul's Deputy Minister for Trade, Park Jong-won, he is over in Washington to sort things out with U.S. trade officials. Do you think it's too late to try to make deals with the U.S. on tariffs and trade-related matters, or, better late than never?
Yeah, I don't think it's too late, because the Trump administration will continue to push foreign countries to boost trade competitiveness of the U.S. There are many industries, like the automobile industry, for example, that have been really important for the U.S. economy for a long time, especially by taking important roles in creating jobs, but have lost their competitiveness in the global market. So I think this seems to be sustained. So the Trump administration will implement even higher tariffs on the other goods that experience large trade deficits. So I think this is not late that much.
Definitely. Steel, aluminum, automobile, and chips and pharmaceuticals will be on the way as well. Now, according to Bach, he'll be aiming to engage in what he calls mutually beneficial discussions with Washington. Now, what kind of strategies do you think Bach has ready to use? I mean, what is it that Seoul needs to work on the most and right now?
Yeah, I think the most important task that Deputy Minister for Trade is to persuade the U.S. officials with the logic and the data that raising tariff is not the way to improve the state of the U.S. economy. For example, firms really react to the policy changes as we have seen for the last several days on the steel industry that has already undergone the higher tariff rate. The firms in the US already respond to the higher tariff rate by increasing the price that they charge, which does not improve their competitiveness in the market, but only increase the inflation rate again. And I think having patience with the negotiation procedure is also necessary because the US officials will not agree on the negotiation very soon.
Well, in addition to government officials, a business delegation is also heading to the U.S. today with investment cooperation plans, including, increasing imports of American energy and also collaboration in the shipbuilding sector. Now, this is offering the U.S. what we have and hope for the best. This is a lesson that we learned from the first Trump administration.
Yes, as you pointed out, we have already experienced the Trump administration more than 4 years ago. It pushes the country using the negotiation power that it has, and as a small open economy like Korea, that heavily depends on the US and export. What we can do best is to offer the US what we can do best, like constructing the factories in the US and offshoring to the US or something like that. So it is make some sacrifice.
Well, are you saying that we need a plan that increases imports, from the U.S. while reducing actual damage? I mean, what could that plan be? Is it just more importing more American cars or American goods to South Korea?
Yes, in principle, yeah, it's possible, but to me, it's not that easy to increase import from the US only by the will of the government. First, effective tariff rate on many goods imported from the US is already almost zero, implying that lowering price cannot be the solution for the US produced goods, say cars, to increase their market shares in Korea. Second, consumer demand is also determined at the market based on the quality of the goods and the price competitiveness or something like that. So the government cannot alone boost the demand for the US cars. So my point is that it should be the US firms that attract consumers in Korea by boosting their competitiveness over the other goods, not the Korean government. But we can still make the effort, but I'm not sure if that's that effective.
So increasing more goods from the U.S. may not be the ultimate solution to deal with this whole tariff salvo. Professor Shim, thank you so much for sharing your insight with us this morning. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
And in other news, the S&P 500 closed at a record high on Tuesday as markets awaited the minutes of the Federal Reserve's January monetary policy meeting. The S&P 500 rose 0.2% to stand at 6,129 points. This comes ahead of the Federal Open Market Committee minutes released set for Wednesday afternoon, which could contain clues about how long the Fed will keep rates unchanged. At the Fed's meeting last month, it decided to leave its benchmark lending rate unchanged following 3 straight cuts, saying inflation remained somewhat elevated. Both U.S. and Russian officials walked out of their first peace talks on Ukraine with confidence and satisfaction on Tuesday. U.S. President Donald Trump even hinted that he would meet Russian President Vladimir Putin before the end of February. Peunji has more.
Top diplomats of the United States and Russia held talks in Saudi Arabia on Tuesday, marking their first formal meeting aimed at ending the Ukraine war since it began 3 years ago. Following the meeting that lasted around 4.5 hours, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio told reporters that he's convinced Russia is willing to engage in a serious process of ending the conflict, and said this was the first step of a long and difficult journey.
In order to bring an end to any conflict, there has to be concessions made by all sides.
Rubio's Russian counterpart described the conversation as useful, but said his country will not accept NATO troops in Ukraine as part of any peace deal.
We explained today that the presence of troops from NATO countries under a foreign flag, under the flag of the European Union, or under national flags, it does not change anything. This is, of course, unacceptable to us.
The two countries decided to hold more talks on ending the war and also agreed to work toward improving ties. Following the talks, Rubio held phone calls with his counterparts from the UK, France, Germany, and Italy, in an apparent move to reassure the European countries over concerns that they may have no place in the peace negotiations. Meanwhile, as Ukraine was not invited to Tuesday's peace talks, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said negotiations to end the war in Ukraine should not take place behind the backs of the parties involved.
You can talk about anything, but no decision can be made without Ukraine on how to end the war in Ukraine. We were not invited to this meeting, the U.S.-Russia meeting in Saudi Arabia. It was a surprise for us, as well as for many.
In response, U.S. President Donald Trump dismissed Kyiv's concern about being left out and almost suggested that Ukraine was to blame for a war that began only after Russia's invasion.
But today I heard, oh, well, we weren't invited. Well, you've been there for 3 years. You should have ended it 3 years. You should have never started it. You could have made a deal.
Trump also hinted that he may meet Russian President Vladimir Putin this month. As he walked out of the press conference in Mar-a-Lago, he answered probably when asked if he still expected to meet Putin before the end of this month. Peunji, Arirang News.
At the Constitutional Court, the 9th hearing of President Yoon Suk-yeol's impeachment trial took place on Tuesday, with justices dismissing Yoon's request to adjust his 10th hearing date, as his criminal trial proceedings also begin the same day. Our Oh Seong has more.
The Constitutional Court rejected President Yoon Suk-yeol's request to rearrange one impeachment hearing, which coincides with the start of his criminal trial proceedings this week. On Tuesday, during the president's 9th trial hearing, Acting Chief Justice Moon Young-bae said the 10th session on Thursday will go ahead as planned, dismissing a request by Yoon's team to hold the session next week, as the Seoul Central District Court will begin the president's pre-trial hearings for his criminal case on Thursday morning.
While there's criticism that the overlapping date weakens Yoon's right to legal self-defense, the Constitutional Court has decided to push through with Thursday's hearing at 3 p.m, an hour later than initially planned, stating that Yoon's criminal trial begins at 10 a.m.
During Tuesday's hearing, legal representatives of the National Assembly and President Yoon further made their case for and against impeachment. The Assembly's panel called for Yoon's swift removal from office, saying the declaration of martial law and related decrees were illegal as they did not go through cabinet procedures, and accused him of dictatorial actions.
This is a direct attack on the principles of the rule of law and the separation of powers. From the perspective of constitutional protection, it is an absolutely unacceptable act.
Yoon's side continued to argue that declaring martial law was a constitutional right of the president, and that the opposition-led parliament had forced his hand.
The opposition paralysed the judiciary, legislature and administration with its countless impeachments, interference with the Constitutional Court's composition, reckless budget cuts, legislative manoeuvres to shield its leader Lee Jae-myung, and obstruction of government policy bills. In a short amount of time, the president initiated a martial law that was constitutional, legal and peaceful, as a plea to the people.
They further raised suspicions of false ballot papers and potential Chinese interference, causing electoral irregularities as a pretext for declaring martial law. Yoon's lawyers say they will review on Wednesday whether there's further evidence and witnesses to present. The 10th hearing on Thursday will feature 3 witness examinations, including with Prime Minister Han Duck-soo. Former intelligence official Hong Jang-won will return to the court for further questioning, this time by Yoon's legal team. National Police Agency Chief Cho Ji-ho will be forced to attend after 2 absences due to illness. Experts say the court is likely to add 1 more hearing to hear the closing arguments and the president's final statement. Yoon on Tuesday decided to return to the Seoul Detention Center and sit out the 9th hearing. If the trial concludes next week, a ruling will be made in the first half of March. In past presidential impeachment trials, a verdict was reached within 2 weeks. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
The Constitutional Court will hold the first impeachment trial hearing for Prime Minister Han Duck-soo and a separate hearing on the dispute over whether voting standards to impeach him were valid. The opposition-led parliament voted to remove him from office in December after Han, as acting president, refused to approve Constitutional Court justices until a bipartisan agreement was reached on the candidates. Han has also shown resistance to various opposition-led bills railroaded through Parliament. The dispute case was filed by the ruling People Power Party as it clashed with the opposition over the required number of votes to impeach Han Duck-soo. The opposition argues that the standard for impeaching a cabinet member should apply, requiring a simple majority. The ruling party says as Han was acting president, the same threshold as a president to impeachment should have applied, which requires a 2/3 majority. Now, the first trial hearing will begin at 2 p.m. today, and the authority dispute hearing is at 4 p.m. Subscription services are showing strength in the consumer market, with a recent survey showing that 94.8% of respondents have experienced using subscription services. According to the Korea Chamber of Commerce and Industry on Wednesday, a survey on consumer subscription service usage conducted with Macromill Embrain on 1,000 adults nationwide showed that video streaming services led the way, with 60.8%, followed by shopping membership at over 52%. And nearly 40% of the respondents have subscribed to 3 to 4 different services. The survey also showed that the service that those in their 20s and 30s want to subscribe the most is generative AI, while those in their 40s, 50s, and 60s prefer subscriptions to health and home products. A special ceremony was held this week to celebrate students overcoming rare muscular and respiratory diseases. Just like Stephen Hawking, these individuals have defied the odds in the pursuit of knowledge. Our Kim Jong-sil went to their celebration.
A ceremony honored young individuals with muscular dystrophy who continue to pursue education. This rare type of disease can affect movement, speech, and even breathing. However, with personalized care at Yeonsei Gangnam Severance Hospital's Pulmonary Rehab Center, they've overcome numerous challenges.
한국 욕심들을 축하하는 이 귀한 자리에 입학생 대표로서 축사할 수 있는 기회를 허락해 주셔서 진심으로 감사드립니다.
20-year-old Ji-sung has been a patient at this hospital since he was a child. Still undergoing treatment, Ji-sung will start university as a freshman next month.
In the past, my breathing difficulties made daily life very uncomfortable. But now, I'm able to deliver a speech like this and take part in events and school activities, which is truly wonderful.
The perseverance of these students has been made possible by the medical support of experts like Professor Kang Sung-woong, a leader in this field.
Watching these students overcome their struggles makes me realize what I'm going through is not a big deal. While I help my patients, I've received a lot of help myself.
Professor Kang also shared his approach to treating his patients.
Just like how a weak leg requires a cane for support, these patients need specialized breathing support. My goal is to help them choose the right breathing method so they can continue their social activities and lead fulfilling lives.
These students' achievements prove that with the right care and determination, anything is possible.
He has grown up healthily and has worked harder on his studies than we ever expected. We are proud and very grateful.
The resilience of these students paves the way for a bright future and serves as an inspiration to never give up. Kim Jong-sil, Arirang News.
Now let's take a look at the stories from around the world with our Choi Ji-hee. Good morning, Ji-hee.
Good morning, Tommy.
So, Ji-hee, let's begin with the talks between the leaders of India and Qatar. What are the latest developments?
Right. India and Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Qatar's Emir have elevated bilateral relations to a strategic partnership. During Qatar Emir Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani's two-day official visit to New Delhi, both leaders signed an agreement establishing the partnership, reflecting their commitment to deepening cooperation across various sectors. While the current trade volume between the two nations stands at approximately $14 billion, the new partnership aims to increase the figure to $28 billion by 2030. Discussions also included the potential signing of a free trade agreement to facilitate more active economic exchanges. Also, both countries signed a revised double taxation avoidance agreement aimed at fostering a more conducive environment for business and investment. Polish President Andrzej Duda announced Tuesday that the United States had assured Poland that there would be no reduction in American troop presence in Eastern Europe. Duda said U.S. officials, including Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth and Ukraine envoy Keith Kellogg, confirmed the U.S. commitment to maintaining its current military presence in Eastern Europe. Currently, approximately 10,000 U.S. troops are stationed in Poland, which is an increase following Russia's invasion of Ukraine in 2022. The U.S. established its first permanent military base in Poland in 2023. The assurance aligns with Poland's ongoing efforts to bolster its defense capabilities and underscores the strategic partnership between the two countries. It comes against the backdrop of heightened security concerns in Eastern Europe regarding potential threats from Russia. The Vatican on Tuesday confirmed that Pope Francis has been diagnosed with bilateral pneumonia. The Pope, aged 88, has been hospitalized at Rome's Gemelli Hospital since February 14th, initially diagnosed with bronchitis, which worsened after a week. While the Vatican reports that the Pope continues to receive treatment and is in good spirits, all public engagements have been canceled. Pope Francis has a history of lung infections and had part of his right lung removed when he was young. Chinese tech giant Huawei unveiled on Tuesday its trifold smartphone outside China. The Mate XT Ultimate design is the first phone in the world to feature a dual hinge system, where the flexible OLED display can expand from a compact 6.4 inches to a tablet-like 10.2 inches when fully unfolded. It operates on Huawei's proprietary software instead of Google services. The Mate XD's starting price point is approximately $3,660 and is currently listed for sale in several countries, including Malaysia and Saudi Arabia. Pre-orders have reportedly surpassed 6.5 million units.
Winter is still holding on tight, and even though we are hoping for spring to make an entrance, the bitter cold and dry weather continues across much of Korea. Feels like temperatures in the capital were minus 10 degrees Celsius earlier this morning. It's chilly and very dry out there. More regions are under dry weather alerts, and even east of Seoul is under dry weather advisory. Meanwhile, the west coast and Jeju Island are under a strong wind advisory. And these are ways to boost indoor humidity naturally. But if you're heading out, keep your moisturizer handy and drink plenty of water. A little extra hydration goes a long way. Afternoon highs will be 1 to 2 degrees lower today, topping out at 1 degree in Seoul, Daegu at 5 degrees under mostly sunny skies with decent air quality. Looking ahead, this cold, dry pattern will stick around for the rest of the week and into the weekend. Temperatures will start trending milder early next week, so until then, stay warm and hydrated.
That wraps it up for us this morning. New Day at Arirang will be back tomorrow at the same time, 10 a.m. Korea time. Thanks for watching.